The year was 4207, and the galaxy was a vastly different place. The Galactic Council, once the pinnacle of unity and justice, had expanded into the farthest reaches of space, conquering countless worlds and civilizations. They had made themselves the custodians of the galaxy, deciding the fate of entire species with the press of a button or the click of a bureaucratic pen. And yet, there was one world, one species, that they had erased from existence so completely that no record, no trace, remained: Earth. The humans of Earth had been arrogant. They had fought their wars, exploited their planet, and reached for the stars without understanding the cost. The Council had warned them. The humans had ignored the warnings. And so, 3,000 years ago, Earth was erased from the galactic map. Its entire solar system was quarantined, its people wiped out as an example to the rest of the universe. It was an act of justice, as far as the Council was concerned, one that had remained unchallenged for millennia. Until now. Captain Eric Vance stood at the helm of the Resolute, his fingers dancing over the controls as the ship slipped through the inky blackness of space. His crew, a motley assortment of humans and non-humans from various parts of the galaxy, were nervously watching the monitors. They had all heard the rumors, the stories whispered in back alleys of space stations and interstellar taverns. Earth, the myth, the legend, had not truly been erased. There had been survivors, remnants of a forgotten world, hidden away for centuries. And now, Eric and his crew were about to make history. But the mission wasn't as simple as just finding Earth. They were coming to reclaim it, to avenge their fallen ancestors, to bring their people back from the dead. It was an act of defiance against the very institutions that had erased them. The stakes were enormous, but so were the risks. The Galactic Council had eyes and ears everywhere, and they would not allow such an affront to go unpunished. As the Resolute glided deeper into the uncharted reaches of the galaxy, Eric's mind raced. The crew was made up of individuals who had been wronged by the Council in one way or another, but none of them knew the full scope of what they were about to face. The stories were just stories until now. The legends of Earth were mere whispers, fragments of a lost world. But the ancient technologies that lay hidden there, those were no myth. And Eric had every intention of harnessing them. "Captain!" Lieutenant Kira's voice cut through the hum of the control room, pulling him from his thoughts. "We've located the system." Eric's heart skipped a beat. The coordinates had been hard to come by, buried in encrypted data and lost transmissions. But they had found it. Earth. Or what was left of it. "Are we sure?" Eric asked, his voice tight. Kira nodded, her face pale. "Yes, sir. The system's coordinates match the old records. No ships have entered this region for centuries, and the surrounding systems are all heavily monitored. But there's no mistake. We've found Earth." Eric stood, pacing in front of the viewport. The crew waited, each of them knowing that they were on the precipice of something monumental. If they succeeded, they would forever change the course of galactic history. But if they failed, they would be hunted down and erased just like their ancestors. "What do we know about the system?" Eric asked. "It's dead," Kira said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "The star has gone nova, and the planets are nothing but ruins. Earth, or whatever was left of it, is uninhabitable. The Council erased every trace of life there. There's nothing left but dust." Eric looked at her, a fire burning in his eyes. "You're telling me that after 3,000 years there's no chance Earth could have been saved? That there's no hope?" Kira hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "The data suggests nothing. But there's a chance. We're getting strange readings. Anomalies in the system that shouldn't exist." Anomalies. The word hung in the air like a challenge, and Eric couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something far bigger than just the remnants of a destroyed world. "What kind of anomalies?" he asked. "Energy signatures," she replied, her fingers flying over the console. "Not just one or two, but a network. It's faint, but it's there. Almost like something is hidden." A strange sense of hope flickered inside Eric. It was the first real lead they'd gotten, the first piece of tangible evidence that Earth wasn't as destroyed as the Council had claimed. But something didn't sit right. Why would the Council go to such lengths to erase a planet if there was nothing left to protect? And why had no one ever spoken of this before? Set a course, Eric said, his voice resolute. Let's find out what's hiding in that system. As the Resolute adjusted its course, the crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. The silence in the control room was deafening, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. Eric's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, about Earth, about his ancestors, and about the vengeance that was about to unfold. But little did they know, they weren't the only ones watching. Far above, on a station hidden deep in the dark recesses of the galaxy, a figure stood in the shadows, watching the readings on a monitor. His eyes narrowed as he studied the anomaly, the faint but unmistakable signature of a ship entering the forbidden zone. A cold smile spread across his face. "They've come," the figure whispered, his voice low and dangerous. "Let the game begin." As the Resolute sped toward the unknown, the first cracks in the grand illusion of the Galactic Council were beginning to show. And with them, the spark of rebellion had been ignited. The game was on. This section introduces the central conflict, the mysterious nature of Earth's destruction, and sets the stage for the mission that will change the course of history. It leaves readers with a sense of urgency and intrigue, building anticipation for the challenges ahead. The Resolute tore through the silent expanse of space, its sleek hull cutting through the blackness as the crew held their collective breath. The stars outside seemed to pulse with a cold, distant light, a reminder of how small they all were in this vast, indifferent universe. Yet, for the first time in centuries, Eric felt something he hadn't expected: hope. It flickered in the back of his mind like a candle flame, stubborn and bright. The coordinates had led them deep into the debris field surrounding what had once been Earth's solar system. But even as the Resolute maneuvered around floating asteroids and shattered moons, there was a palpable sense of unease among the crew. Something wasn't right. The anomaly Kira had detected was growing stronger as they neared the heart of the system, and the air seemed to thrum with an energy that felt unnatural. "Captain," Kira's voice was tense. "I'm getting strange readings. The energy signatures are intensifying." Eric nodded, his jaw tightening. "Keep me informed. Whatever it is, we need to be ready for anything." The deep hum of the ship's engines provided a steady rhythm as they drifted closer to the source of the anomaly. Eric stood at the helm, gazing at the swirling wreckage of planets and moons. This was Earth's graveyard, a place that the Council had hoped would remain a forgotten tomb. Yet here they were, trespassing on sacred ground. Suddenly, the ship's monitors flashed with a violent burst of static, and the lights in the control room flickered. Eric's heart skipped a beat. "Report!" I don't know, Captain. The systems are malfunctioning," Kira said, her voice strained. "Something's interfering with the ship's sensors. We're being pulled in." "Pulled in? How?" Eric asked, confusion lacing his tone. "It's as if something is drawing us in, like a tractor beam, but it's not a traditional one. The gravitational pull is unnatural," she replied. Eric's pulse quickened. They were close now. So close to whatever secret Earth had hidden for millennia. "Hold steady, Kiara. We're not turning back now." Despite her protests, the Resolute lurched, its engines whining in protest as the mysterious force gripped them, pulling them toward the center of the system. The crew scrambled to stay focused, adjusting systems and readings to counter the strange, unseen force that threatened to overpower them. Suddenly, the interference cut out, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The ship's systems returned to normal, but the crew was left on edge. Kira scanned the new readings, her brow furrowed in confusion. "There's something here. I can't explain it. It's not natural. But it's familiar." "What do you mean, familiar?" Eric pressed. "I can't quite place it, but the energy signatures. They're almost like Earth technology. Or remnants of it." Eric's breath caught in his throat. Could it be? Could there really be something from Earth hidden in this destroyed system? Something that had survived all these years, waiting to be found? Before he could voice his thoughts, the ship's external cameras flickered on, revealing a massive structure emerging from the debris field. It was a massive sphere, cloaked in shadows, its surface pocked with scars and craters. It was unlike anything Eric had ever seen, a relic of Earth's past, yet seemingly untouched by time. And it was enormous, far larger than anything they had expected to find. "What the hell is that?" Kiara breathed. "I don't know," Eric said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But that's our destination." As the Resolute drew closer, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The structure felt alive, as if it were waiting for them, beckoning them to come closer. The anomaly they had detected earlier was now fully concentrated within it, pulsing with an energy that seemed to seep into the very fabric of space itself. "We're getting closer," Kiara reported. "The energy readings are off the charts." Eric nodded, but he didn't feel the excitement he had expected. This wasn't just a mission to reclaim Earth. It was a journey into the unknown, a journey that could either bring salvation or damnation. The structure loomed larger on the viewport, its dark surface riddled with unknown markings. As the Resolute moved closer, a series of massive doors, ancient and weathered, began to open, revealing a vast, empty chamber within. "There's a docking bay," Kiara said, her voice trembling. "It looks operational. But how? This thing has been abandoned for centuries." "Dock us. We're going in," Eric ordered, his voice steady despite the growing unease in his chest. As they docked the ship within the structure, the entire crew couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This was no longer a simple mission of revenge. It was a discovery. A revelation. The entire galaxy was about to learn that Earth had not only survived, but had hidden away in this forgotten tomb. The doors to the docking bay hissed open, and a cold, mechanical air seeped into the ship. Eric led his crew through the darkened corridors, their footsteps echoing off the walls as they ventured deeper into the heart of the structure. The walls were adorned with strange symbols, alien markings that Eric couldn't decipher, but they resonated with a sense of ancient power. "Where is everyone?" Lieutenant Soren asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's no sign of life." "They're gone," Eric said, his voice grim. "But something is here. Something is still active." The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air felt thick with the weight of something ancient and powerful, and the energy readings spiked again, now pulsing with an intensity that made the walls hum. Finally, they reached the central chamber of the structure, a massive hall with a towering pedestal at its center. Upon the pedestal lay a crystalline object, glowing faintly with an ethereal light. It was beautiful, almost otherworldly. And yet, Eric felt an immediate sense of dread as he approached it. "Is this it?" Kiara asked, awe and fear mixing in her voice. "I don't know," Eric said, his gaze fixed on the crystal. "But I'm about to find out." As his fingers brushed the surface of the crystal, a sudden jolt of energy shot through him, sending a shockwave through the room. The lights flickered, and the chambers shook violently. The crew staggered, struggling to keep their footing as the ground trembled beneath them. The crystal pulsed once more, and a deep, mechanical voice boomed throughout the chamber. "Who dares awaken the heart of Earth?" The voice was ancient, but undeniably human. The very words reverberated through Eric's bones, and he realized with a shock that this was no mere artifact. It was a beacon, a message, a warning. The voice continued, its tone growing colder. "You have come to reclaim Earth. But what will you do when you learn the truth? You are not alone in this galaxy, and you have awakened something far darker than you can imagine." The ground beneath their feet cracked open, revealing a dark, swirling abyss. And from that abyss something stirred. Eric's heart raced. The stakes had just become far higher than he ever imagined. The game was no longer about vengeance. It was about survival. In this section, the stakes are raised as the crew discovers the ancient structure that holds the secrets of Earth's destruction. They encounter an unknown force that threatens not only their mission but their very survival. The conflict deepens, and the mystery of Earth's fate begins to unravel, leaving the crew facing dangers they hadn't anticipated. The ground beneath them trembled as the dark abyss beneath the pedestal opened wider, and the pulse of the crystal seemed to grow louder, vibrating through the very air. Eric's heart hammered in his chest, his instincts screaming for him to run. But there was no escape. Whatever was emerging from the depths of the structure, whatever force had been awakened by their presence, it was far beyond their understanding. The mechanical voice echoed again, its cold resonance rattling the walls, sending chills down Eric's spine. You have awakened the heart of Earth. It is the last remnant of a civilization gone, a technology beyond your comprehension. Before Eric could respond, a deep rumble shook the chamber, and the pedestal at the center cracked open. From the darkness below, a monstrous figure began to rise, something ancient, something colossal, its form obscured by shadow and darkness. It was unlike any creature Eric had ever seen. A towering presence, covered in metallic, reflective armor, its silhouette outlined by a faint, otherworldly glow. The ground beneath it cracked with every movement as it ascended from the abyss, and the very air seemed to warp around it, thick with the weight of its presence. The crew stared, frozen, fear coursing through their veins. Eric's mind raced. This was no mere artifact. This was a weapon, a guardian, and it had been lying dormant for thousands of years. And now, it had been reawakened. Identify yourselves. The voice boomed again, this time accompanied by the sound of a low, mechanical hum that filled the room. You are trespassers. Your presence here is an affront to Earth's legacy. Kira's voice cracked with a mix of awe and terror. What is this thing? It's not just a thing, Eric muttered, his mind struggling to process the information. It's a remnant of Earth's technology, something left behind. Something to protect this place. The towering figure, its armor gleaming with an unnatural light, stepped forward. Its movements were precise, calculated, and utterly alien. It had no face, only a blank, reflective surface where a face should have been, a dark void that seemed to peer into their souls. It raised a massive arm, its hand extending toward them like a harbinger of doom. We are the guardians of Earth, the voice continued, reverberating in Eric's chest. You do not have the right to claim what was lost. No one shall awaken what was never meant to return. A low rumble echoed from deep within the structure, and suddenly, the air crackled with energy. Eric could feel it, the intense weight of the energy building up, preparing to unleash a force that could obliterate them all in an instant. Get ready! Eric shouted, snapping the crew out of their stupor. We need to act fast, or we won't make it out of here. The Guardians of Earth weren't just relics of a forgotten past, they were the last defense against anyone daring to reclaim the lost world. This was no longer about revenge. It was about surviving the wrath of a force that had waited for millennia to strike down those who dared disturb its slumber. Eric raised his blaster, his hands steady despite the growing tension in the room. The others followed suit, weapons drawn, but Eric knew deep down that their guns would be no match for whatever this being was. They had no idea what kind of power it possessed, what kind of devastation it could unleash. The Guardian's hand shifted, a metallic screech echoing through the chamber as it clenched into a fist. The air around them grew heavier, and the ground beneath their feet began to crack, sending fissures running through the chamber. The energy in the room was building to an unimaginable height. We won't let you stop us, Eric said, his voice low, defiant. We came here to reclaim our legacy. A ripple of energy erupted from the Guardian's hand, sending a shockwave through the room. The crew was thrown back, their bodies crashing against the walls as the sheer force of the blast sent debris flying in every direction. Eric's vision blurred, and he struggled to push himself to his feet. His ears rang, and his chest ached from the impact. We have to fight back, Kira shouted, struggling to stand. We can't just let it wipe us out. Eric nodded, shaking off the disorientation. We need to find its weakness. There's always a way. The Guardian's cold, mechanical voice rang out again, its words laced with finality. You are insignificant. You cannot defeat what was never meant to be defeated. But Eric wasn't listening to the words. He was watching, studying, looking for any sign of vulnerability in the towering figure. Its movements were deliberate, calculated, but there was something not quite right. Its posture was perfect, but there was a slight tremor in the air around it. A flicker of uncertainty that gave Eric a spark of hope. Kiara, Soren, scan its energy readings! Eric barked, his mind working at full speed. Find a weakness. Now! The two officers scrambled to their consoles, their eyes darting between readings and holographic displays. But it was Soren who finally spoke, his voice full of disbelief. There's something strange about its energy output, he said, his fingers flying over the controls. It's fluctuating, as if it's not drawing power from a central source. It's siphoning energy from the environment itself. Eric's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a trap. The Guardian wasn't invincible. It had limits. It needed to draw energy from its surroundings to remain functional. And if they could disrupt that flow, they could weaken it. Isolate its energy flow, Eric ordered. Shut it down. The crew worked quickly, but the Guardian wasn't going to make it easy. It sensed their intentions and reacted swiftly, sending another shockwave of energy toward them. This time, Eric was ready. He dove behind cover, narrowly avoiding the blast as it exploded against the wall. Kira's voice rang out, filled with determination. I've got it! The energy source is linked to the central core of the structure. If we can disrupt the core, we can cut off its power. Eric's eyes narrowed. This was their chance. He could feel the tension in the air, the pulse of the energy building to an unbearable level. Soren, Kiara, on me! We're taking that core out! Together, they sprinted toward the central chamber's core, the Guardian's attention momentarily distracted as it focused on stopping their attempts. They reached the base of the chamber, where the heart of the structure lay hidden. There, nestled deep within the framework of the chamber, was a glowing crystalline core, the true source of the Guardian's power. We have to act now! Kira shouted, her voice strained with urgency. Eric reached for the control panel and began working frantically, trying to find a way to disable the core. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he deciphered the alien interface, feeling the presence of the Guardian closing in on them. But they had no choice. They had to destroy the core if they had any hope of surviving. Finally, with a desperate press of a button, the core's energy began to destabilize. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the structure shuddered, and the Guardian's movements slowed. Its energy reserves were failing. No! The Guardian screamed, its voice now tinged with panic. You cannot! But it was too late. The core cracked open, sending a shockwave through the entire chamber. The Guardian's body convulsed, its form collapsing in on itself as its power source collapsed. The lights in the chamber flickered, and the oppressive energy that had filled the air began to dissipate. Eric's breath came in ragged gasps as he watched the Guardian crumble. Is it over? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kira nodded, her eyes wide with disbelief. I think so. We did it. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the failing structure around them. Eric felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion wash over him. They had faced the unimaginable and won. But the cost of their victory would haunt them for the rest of their lives. As they made their way back to the Resolute, Eric's mind couldn't help but linger on one thought. This was only the beginning. The galaxy would learn of their actions, and the Council would come for them. Earth had been reclaimed, but at what cost? And what other dark secrets lay buried beneath the stars, waiting to be uncovered? In this section, the conflict escalates as the crew faces the true power of the Guardians of Earth, an ancient, near-invincible force. Their struggle to survive leads to a dramatic, high-stakes confrontation, forcing them to rely on their resourcefulness and determination to overcome the odds. The tension is at its peak, and while victory is achieved, the price of that victory remains uncertain. The Resolute stood in the docking bay of the ancient structure, its engines idling as the crew made their way back to the ship, their bodies battered and bruised from the chaotic battle inside the chamber. The air around them seemed to buzz with a quiet tension, as if the very universe was holding its breath, waiting for them to make their next move. Eric's mind raced, replaying the events in his head, the awakening of the Guardian, the destruction of the core, the rush to escape before the entire structure collapsed. They had won, but at what cost? As they boarded the ship and made their way to the bridge, a sense of victory washed over the crew, but it was tempered with an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. The Resolute hummed quietly as Kira and Soren navigated the ship back to open space, far from the crumbling remains of the Earth system. "Captain, we've done it," Kira said, her voice shaky but triumphant. "We've destroyed the core. The Guardian's down. The energy fluctuations are stabilizing." Eric leaned against the wall of the bridge, his arms crossed, eyes focused on the dark void outside the viewport. "Yes, but for how long? We've taken down one Guardian, but the Council will be furious. They won't let this go. Earth is gone, and it's never supposed to come back." "Is it really gone?" Kira asked, her voice tinged with a hint of doubt. "I mean, we saw what was left. There's more to it. The core, the Guardian, it was all connected to something bigger, something more powerful." Eric didn't answer at first. His mind wandered back to the Guardian's final words, the cryptic warning that echoed in his head. "You've awakened something darker than you can imagine." The Resolute lurched slightly as it entered the jump point, the stars outside stretching as the ship moved into faster-than-light travel. Eric's eyes narrowed. There was so much they still didn't know about what they had discovered. Earth's disappearance, its reappearance, the technologies hidden in the wreckage. It all pointed to something far greater than a simple vengeance mission. There was a mystery at the heart of the galaxy, a story that had been hidden for millennia, and they had only scratched the surface. "Captain, I'm picking up a transmission," Soren said, his voice suddenly tense. "It's coming through a private channel. It's encrypted." Eric turned to face him, his pulse quickening. "Can you decrypt it?" Soren worked quickly, his fingers flying over the controls. Moments later, the transmission cut through the static, and a voice crackled to life, deep and unnervingly calm. "Eric Vance, Captain of the Resolute. I know what you've done. And I know what you found. Earth's resurrection was never meant to happen, and you have no idea what you've unleashed." The voice sent a shiver down Eric's spine. It was familiar, but he couldn't place it. He glanced at Kira, who had gone pale, and then at Soren, whose brow furrowed in confusion. "Who is this?" Eric demanded, his voice steady despite the fear growing in his chest. "You don't remember me, do you, Eric?" The voice chuckled darkly. "I suppose it doesn't matter now. The important thing is that Earth is far from the only world the Council has erased. You've awakened something that was never meant to be touched." The transmission abruptly ended, leaving the crew in stunned silence. "What the hell was that?" Kira asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," Eric muttered. "But I have a feeling we've made a much bigger mistake than we realize." The rest of the journey through space was a blur. The crew's minds were consumed by the cryptic transmission, the implications of what they had done settling over them like a shadow. The Guardian had been just the tip of the iceberg. Earth's destruction had been a deliberate act by the Galactic Council, and now that they had reawakened something tied to it, they were no longer just rebels fighting for revenge. They were playing a much larger game. The galaxy's balance was shifting, and they were at the center of it. When they finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel, they found themselves on the edge of a quiet, barren system, light years away from the Earth's destruction zone. This was their next stop, a hidden base in the uncharted reaches of space. It had been their original goal, a place to regroup, to plan the next stage of their mission. But now, it felt like a hollow victory. They were still at the mercy of forces far beyond their understanding. The base, a small asteroid fortress, was well concealed in the depths of space, shielded from prying eyes. As they docked, Eric motioned for the crew to gather in the command center. They had questions, too many questions, and only one place to get answers. "This is it," Eric said, staring out at the station. "We've made it, but we're not safe yet. We need to figure out what that transmission was about, and what it means for us." Kira stepped forward, her expression serious. "We've already taken the first step in reclaiming Earth. We've revived a legacy that was thought to be lost forever. But something tells me we've just opened a door that we can't close." "I don't think we were ever meant to close it," Eric replied, his gaze hardening. I think Earth was erased for a reason. And whatever we've awoken, whatever that voice was talking about, it's more dangerous than we can imagine. Then what do we do now? Soren asked, his tone uncertain. We fight, Eric said, his voice steady. We fight for Earth, for humanity, for the future. But we do it knowing that we might not be able to control what's coming next. They entered the base, and the crew began to work. The first step was to decrypt more of the transmission, to find out who had been speaking to them. But as they dug deeper into the encrypted messages, another unsettling truth emerged. The figure on the other end of the transmission was someone they knew, a figure from Earth's history, someone who had played a key role in its downfall. The shock rippled through the crew. It wasn't just the Council that wanted Earth to remain forgotten. There were others, people who had ties to Earth's legacy, people who had their own reasons for keeping it hidden. And they would stop at nothing to ensure that the truth of Earth's past remained buried. The next several days were filled with frantic research, decoding, and strategizing. The crew couldn't afford to sit idly by. They had come this far, and now they had to push forward. There was no turning back. Eric stood alone in his quarters one night, staring out into the endless void. He had always thought of Earth as a lost world, a piece of his past that could never be reclaimed. But now, everything had changed. The galaxy was shifting, and humanity was no longer just a footnote in the Council's history. The spark had been lit, and now it was time for them to rise. He reached for the comms device on his desk and sent a message to his crew. It was time for them to prepare for the next phase. The Council might think they've erased us, Eric said to himself, his voice filled with quiet determination. But they're about to learn that you can't erase a people. You can only push them into the dark, and then, when they rise again, they'll burn brighter than ever before. As the crew gathered, Eric gave them the plan. There would be no more hiding in the shadows. They would strike, and they would do it on their own terms. The galaxy had forgotten Earth, but Earth had not forgotten the galaxy. And they were coming to make it remember. This final section brings closure to the immediate conflict, showing how the crew of the Resolute reflects on their actions and prepares for the consequences of their victory. Despite their success in reclaiming Earth and surviving the Guardian, they face an uncertain future. The ending reveals new layers of the mystery and sets the stage for the next chapter in the crew's journey, with humanity poised to reclaim its place in the galaxy.